Hi folks, my name is John Dubuisson, and I'd like to welcome you to my presentation about the rich avian biodiversity of Fort Leavenworth's Weston Bend Bottomlands, and the appreciation for and enjoyment of the natural world that they offer. Over the years, I've learned a lot about the history of Fort Leavenworth. For example, did you know that Chief Joseph and other members of the Nez Perce tribe were confined here for 8 months between 1877 and 1878? They actually set up camp here just behind us at what became Sherman Army Airfield. Back then, the site was the fort's racetrack. Imagine what it would be like to walk through the woods around us, perhaps seeing some of the same species of birds and mammals that Chief Joseph saw here all those years ago. Here in the Midwest, where plowed fields are the norm, we find wonderful places like the Bottomlands, where the wilderness remains preserved. In the coming minutes, we'll learn a little bit about the Bottomlands. We'll find out why so many birds pass through these parts, and we'll talk about just a few of those birds. Finally, I hope you'll discover, as I have, that the avian diversity here is a wonderful, tranquil sight to behold. Fort Leavenworth is the oldest active military installation west of the Mississippi River. From famous generals like Eisenhower, Sherman, and Patton to infamous prisoners, many of the Army's best and worst have spent some kind of time at Fort Leavenworth. But there are other residents, feathered visitors, who spend time here as well. If you look with me to our east and to our north, you'll see a lot of green spaces. These green spaces are called the Weston Bend Bottomlands. They are cottonwood sycamore bottomwood forests that host a number of permanent and migratory avian species, some mammals, and a wonderful diversity of forbs, grasses, trees, and shrubs. They run from the levee to the Missouri River. Some folks at the Kansas Biological Survey think that these bottomlands may be the largest old-growth stand of its kind in the lower Missouri Valley. One thing's for sure, the birds who live here year-round sure like them. And as we'll see, migratory birds like them too. Can I take a quick show of hands? How many of you are active duty or retired military? Thank you. And how many of you are or were military dependents? Thank you. Great. Thanks for your service. I was an E4 many years and uniforms ago. One thing I learned from being in the Army and working for it is that the Army loves to move people around. A lot. Soldiers are always moving on to the next duty station, the next assignment, the next home. So imagine if the Army moved you twice a year, every year. Wouldn't that be tough? Well, that's exactly what happens to migratory birds. They migrate twice a year. A lot of birds pass through or permanently reside in Leavenworth County. In fact, according to the Kansas Ornithological Society, 285 species of birds have been spotted in Leavenworth County over the years. Migratory birds fly south for the winter and wind up in places like the southern United States, Mexico, Central America, and even all the way down to South America. Many birds migrate here for breeding in the spring and summer, taking advantage of the bottomland's rich resources to hatch and rear their young. Other birds are just passing through. You see, North America is divided into 4 major flyways for migratory birds. Some birds are only found within or near a particular flyway. If you look over to the southeast, you'll see the Missouri River. Just across the Missouri River is the Mississippi Flyway. Here in the lower 48 states, the flyway basically runs from Minnesota down to my home state of Louisiana, and also east from Missouri to Ohio. Can you guess which flyway Kansas is in? I'll give you a hint. Think about where we are in the country. Well, the geographic center of the lower 48 states is just north of Lebanon, Kansas. So, we're located in the Central Flyway. Here in the lower 48, the Central Flyway basically runs from North Dakota to Texas, and then west to the Rockies. So what does that mean for bird watchers here in Fort Leavenworth? Being on the border of those 2 flyways means we get to see a lot of those birds who are just passing through. And lucky for us, the Weston Bend Bottomlands are a great place for them to take a pit stop. Now, some of you may be thinking that birds don't read maps. So how do they know where to migrate? Well, just like soldiers, birds can use orientation. Some birds use the position of the sun to orient themselves, showing them which direction to fly. Birds, unlike some soldiers, are also great followers. One theory is that some juvenile birds rely on orientation and on following other birds for their first migration. And as they grow older, they may actually learn how to navigate. So they may be able to pick out terrain features and then determine their migration route. That's great if you're navigating during the day. But what about nighttime migrators? Now this is really, really cool. Some birds can actually use celestial navigation, determining their position based on the position of the stars. In fact, my favorite bird species does this. And some of those birds actually navigate here to the bottomlands. If you have that brochure on bird identification that I passed out to you, feel free to take a moment and look it over. My favorite bird looks like a scrap of sky with wings. And that bird is the indigo bunting. During the spring and summer, you can find these wonderful birds right here in the bottomlands. I saw my first indigo bunting last year on May 5th, just inside the tree line to the east of here. I know the date because I was conducting a field survey of avian biodiversity in the bottomlands. What does avian biodiversity mean? Well, I was looking at how many different species and how often they occur. All the annual residents and seasonal residents, like our buntings, make these bottomlands a hotspot for avian biodiversity. Another species that you'll find in the bottomlands is the American goldfinch. The males are bright yellow and black, and during the summer, and perhaps even in the winter, you'll find them here in the bottomlands. In the summer, they're particularly bright yellow. Here in the bottomlands, they really love to perch in the bushes and trees along the levees to our east. If you walk along Chief Joseph Loop, you'll likely see a few on the edges of the bottomlands. Next, we have the northern cardinal, that classic red bird you've likely seen around town. The males are bright red, and the females have more subdued colors. If you can see a cardinal in the bottomlands, look around for its mate and listen to its call. Mating pairs often call out to each other. Speaking of listening, if you get a chance to sit down along the levee, or maybe just inside the bottomlands, you may hear the machine gun sound of woodpeckers as they peck holes into the trees. They do this for foraging, and individual woodpeckers often use the sound to mark out their turf. The most common woodpeckers you'll see in the bottomlands are red-headed woodpeckers and red-bellied woodpeckers. You'll find them on your brochure. You may also see some small black and white woodpeckers called downy woodpeckers. Male downy woodpeckers have a small patch of red on the back of their heads. So far we've primarily covered blue, yellow, and red. I can tell you from experience that all three of these colors really stand out in the bottomlands. So the next time you walk along Chief Joseph Loop, I encourage you to look for these colors. And when you see them, consider taking a few minutes to sit down along the levee and then look and listen for the birds. You'll find that there's a lot going on in the bottomlands as they are filled with the sounds of songbirds. All that activity can have a peaceful, calming effect on people. So I hope that you can see how the avian biodiversity of Weston Bend Bottomlands provides people with an appreciation of and an enjoyment for the natural world. Over the past few minutes, we've talked a bit about the bottomlands and seen that they are a small bastion of old-growth forest right here in our little corner of northeast Kansas. We've seen that the bottomlands location along the Central and Mississippi flyways makes it an ideal spot for bird watching. We've learned a little bit about how birds navigate, with the beautiful indigo bunting using the stars to find its way to our little corner of Kansas. We talked a little bit about just a few of the 285 species you may find here in Leavenworth County. I've asked you to look for blue, yellow, and red as you gaze over the bottomlands. I've asked you to listen for the machine gun sounds of the woodpeckers. Now I offer a quote from biologist and conservationist Rachel Carson from her 1962 book, Silent Spring. Those who contemplate the beauty of the earth find reserves of strength that will endure as long as life lasts. There is something infinitely healing in the repeated refrains of nature, the assurance that dawn comes after night and spring after winter. So, if you get nothing else from this presentation, I hope you'll consider my belief that the natural world is a great source of tranquility. I encourage you to experience it for yourself, right here in the bottomlands. Thank you for your time.